Hello, Brian Codding in the United Kingdom. How are you today?
I'm okay. How are you, Nick?
Oh, not bad.
Good.
Well, you're here at our Blossom Toe special, and you were the lead singer and rhythm and lead guitarist. But, Brian, before we get on to the Blossom Toes, let me ask, how'd you get started in music? What got you interested?
Oh, crikey, that's a long time ago. Hang on, let me scratch my head. I suppose my father, really. I mean, he was, well, by the time I was sort of like a kid, you know, like walking around, he stopped playing, but he was originally a drummer. And I think it's basically because he didn't want me to play music, so, you know, I thought, well, that means I'm going to do it. That kind of thing.
A bit of a rebellion there.
Yeah, a bit of that, yeah. It all happened quite late for me, really. I didn't actually start taking a serious interest till I was about 17 years old.
Is that the time when you started playing in bands?
Yeah, that was it. It all happened very quickly, you know. I mean, I sort of met Brian Belshaw, who was with, you know, with the Blossies. I met him at a factory we worked in, and neither of us were playing anything at the time. And so within the space of a year, we both sort of he picked up a bass guitar, I picked up an acoustic guitar, and another guy in the factory called Alan Kensley, and we'd formed a band called the Gravediggers. A sort of like English sort of rock and roll band. We're playing things like just kind of rock and roll stuff, really, anything, you know.
And how did the Gravediggers do?
Extremely badly, but I mean, it was good fun, you know. We did a few works dances and things like that.
Were you professional?
No, we were still at the factory at the time. That didn't actually last that long. We decided to leave the factory and kind of like slum it, you know, which is what we did. And it all sort of progressed from there, really.
How did it progress? Did the Ingos come next, or were there...
Yeah, the Ingos were basically... I mean, the whole setup up until Blossom Toes was like just mutations of that first band, in effect. Or, you know, it went from the Gravediggers to the Ingos, and we seemed to change names as we changed personnel. So when we changed the name to the Ingos, Alan Kensley, who was also working at the factory, had decided that he didn't want to pack up work because he'd just got a girlfriend and he liked the security of the job. And that's when we got in Eddie Lynch, and that's when we became the Ingos. And Eddie was actually a professional musician at the time, and he sort of came along with a whole lot of tunes that we'd never heard before, like really rhythm and blues. I mean, old rhythm and blues, John Lee Hooker and all that sort of gear.
Were you still in the north of London there, and did you go to London?
Yeah, I mean, I've always lived in the north of London, basically. Even though I'm Welsh, I've never really lived anywhere else.
You commuted down to London gigs, or did you get London gigs by then?
Yeah, I mean, we were sort of doing, to start with, when we were the Ingos, there was a lot of small clubs, you know, like, I mean, you'd call them like cafes, really. But, you know, they'd have sort of groups on, quartet, like 4-pieces, 3-piece groups, going up. And everybody was playing the same kind of music, really. It was sort of like, you know, American rhythm and blues, you know, Chuck Berry stuff, Johnny Hooker, as I said, all that kind of stuff.
When did it start changing, Brian? Did Giorgio Gomelsky come in and...
Well, he didn't actually come in. I mean, we were sort of hanging around in London anyway and doing our little thing, and then we'd sort of go down to the bigger clubs to see other bands like the Yardbirds and John Mayall and Blues Breakers and groups that were actually beginning to happen, really. Giorgio was managing the Yardbirds at the time, and we sort of just, as you do at that sort of age, we just walked up to him and said, "Do you want to manage us?" And he told us where to go. Quite frankly, I can remember that very clearly. So it wasn't instant love, you know, it wasn't love at first sight between Giorgio and us.
So how did you win him over?
Just by pestering the what's it out of him, you know, over a period of about 8 months, going away, coming back, being a bit better, and eventually we got a gig at the Marquee, which was quite a big club at the time, music club for live bands, and Giorgio was there, and he just sort of seemed to take a liking to us, and all of a sudden we were part of his stable.
And the stable included the Yardbirds, of course?
It did, but I mean, what he did with us was he sort of took us on board and immediately shunted us out of France. He said, "Right, I've got a mate in Paris, you can go out there and learn how to play," which is what we did.
Before we get into that, Brian, I read here that you wrote a song that Michael Crawford recorded.
That's right.
Wow.
It was his first record he ever made. I didn't get anywhere, unfortunately. Tour of my songwriting life.
Was he a star at the time? An actor?
He was an up-and-coming actor. I mean, it was the song he actually recorded of ours. I wrote it with Eddie Eddie Lynch, in fact. I mean, we had a sort of songwriting partnership together, and we sort of, apart from playing music, which was totally nothing, totally departed from what we were writing, we were actually sort of writing for a little Tin Pan Alley music publisher called Freddie Poser Music. We'd take songs down to the guy, and he'd, anyway, came up with Mike Crawford, and he said, this is a young actor who'd like to sing, and he wants to sing this song, so he did. And a very nice guy too, I remember him, extremely, very professional bloke. He was just starting out at the time. I mean, that was basically the first thing he'd sung on record.
You should get him to re-record it there, Brian, because he's a big star now. You'll make it a hit.
I know, but there you go.
Make it a hit.
I think I'd get the same reaction as I got from Giorgio when I first spoke to him.
Tell us a little bit about this Paris trip, because you made a couple of trips, and I also read you also played Morocco. Yeah,
well, that was all part of the French connection, really. I mean, as I said, Giorgio shunted us off to France, and we were there for quite a while, really. Well, it seemed quite a while at that age. We were probably over there for about a year. We actually came back in between, and that's when, in fact, Eddie left the band and Jim joined. I mean, up to that point, we were playing in Paris, living in Paris, and the Morocco gig came out of that, in fact. I mean, it's the usual thing. In fact, we were playing at a nightclub doing something or other, and a guy came up and said, do you want to go and play in Morocco, And we said, absolutely. Which is what we did. So we went out there, and it was a very strange thing, because it was basically like a variety show he'd put together. But it was us, and there was a kind of a juggling act, and God knows what else. There was an old lady who told jokes. Very peculiar thing, but good fun.
Whereabouts? What city?
Well, we were kind of toured out there. We were sort of based in Casablanca, but we went over to we did Marrakesh, and we sort of went round the towns within that area, so sort of North Africa.
Did you travel on the Marrakesh Express?
Sorry?
Did you travel on the Marrakesh Express?
No, I didn't get anywhere near it. No, we were in the back of some old cab with this amazing guy. We didn't speak English. All he could say was 2 bob. We'd say to him every morning, how much are you going to charge us today? And he'd go, 2 bob.
Did you haggle?
Which is 2 shillings old money.
Did you haggle?
He wasn't really charging us, it was just the in-joke, because we couldn't say anything else to him at all.
Living in Paris, did you pick up a bit of the language there, Brian? Or?
Yeah. I mean, it's a while ago now, but I've still got a bit of pidgin French. It gets me by, if I go over there to get cheap wine and things. I can still say bonjour and all that.
Well, I heard you recorded songs in French and Italian of all things.
Well, we did. In fact, we only recorded one song in French and Italian. No, we didn't. Sorry, we recorded a couple. But the main one we recorded, which we actually recorded Help by the Beatles in French and Italian. I don't know why Giorgio's balmy ideas. Absolutely nowhere.
Were you known as Les Blossom Toes?
Les Ingos we were then.
Oh, Les Ingos.
We were Les Ingos, yeah. And we actually did this thing. They tried to start a new dance craze called Les Monkeys, which is the monkey. And we sort of put together this daft tune for it, which I might even have a copy of it somewhere, I don't know. I'd have to sort of look around for that.
That sound like fun times there, Brian.
Oh, yeah, I mean, Christ, at that age, I mean, it's all fun, even the bad times. Because quite frankly, while we were out in France, we were just slumming it, as one does. I mean, it's sort of like, you weren't quite squatting, but you were almost squatting. Staying in the grubbiest hotel you could afford, Great fun.
Apparently, according to my research, Johnny Halliday tried to rope you into his band, is that right?
He did, yeah. Yeah, but I mean, that was no big deal as such. That was just basically him. I mean, he used to come down the nightclubs and drink a lot, and he'd come and up and sing with any group that was on, really, if he was drunk enough. And he came up, one night, and he was basically looking for a rhythm guitar player, and he sort of seemed to like the way I was strumming away. But he got short shift from Brian, which put the mockers on that. Brian told him what to do in his best French he could muster.
Well, Jim's given you a really big rap as one of the best rhythm guitarists ever.
Oh, really?
Obviously, Obviously, Johnny thought the same thing.
I don't know about that, but...
Were there other English bands there doing what you were doing over in Paris, or was it just...
No, we were the only band over there. That's probably why we could function, I mean, we got I wouldn't say we got away with murder, but we were given, we had plenty of space to sort of, like, get better, which was what we really needed. We could actually make a lot of mistakes over there and be forgiven for it. If we'd done that in London, I think, it would have been much harder.
Your hometown critics are always the toughest ones, aren't they?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think actually living in France it was great. It was a great experience, you know. I mean, to be able to do that sort of thing at that age, I'm not sure if people can do that now, or if they do, I don't know. It's a great way to sort of grow up.
Let's get on to We Are Ever So Clean, which is, look, I think it's stood the test of time. The songs are great. It's got that whimsy that people of my age, it's very nostalgic, because I was the kid of the 60s, wasn't old enough to understand what was going on. And it's also a unique album. I've got the CD here, Brian, and Mrs. Murphy's Budgerigar and I'll Be Late for Tea. I mean, how English can you get? I'll Be Late for Tea. Well, tell us a bit about the inspiration behind some of the songs there, Brian.
That's difficult. I mean...
let me ask you, I'll Be Late for Tea. Now, where did that come from?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of like... it was kind of influenced by what was, I suppose, happening at the time, you know, on the English music scene, within the pop world, I would say, rather than the English scene, because we weren't actually playing any of that music. We just kind of came back from France, and when we were in France, as I say, we were playing sort of rock and roll and rhythm and blues. And we came back, and Giorgio kind of says, but I'm simplifying things now, but he kind of says, like, you know, you guys have got, you're going to be a flower power band, weren't you? So get out there and write the songs. And so you're sort of listening to everybody else, you know. I mean, don't forget, at the time, the Beatles were the boys, you know. I mean, there's no doubt about that. They were still sort of leading the way in terms of all that sort of stuff. So I suppose, from my point of view, I was not trying to copy the Beatles, but I was just trying to do something that might be as kind of interesting in a different sort of way. Giorgio formed this record company called Marmalade Music. If I remember rightly, I mean, I'll probably get shot down in flames by anybody who really knows, but as far as I know, the idea was to make up this kind of like mythical family type thing, the sons and daughters and husbands and God knows what else of the Marmalade family. So we all had aliases. I think Kevin was known as Plod. Am I right?
I'm looking here, it's Plod. Kevin known as Plod.
Yeah.
Brian known as Scarlet.
Who? Scarlet, oh yeah.
Scarlet.
It was Jim Bartholomew, wasn't he? Jim Bartholomew? It had absolutely no relevance whatsoever. Sorry to say.
So
nothing whatsoever, you know.
When Giorgio had one of these crazy ideas, did you reluctantly go along with them, or were you...
Didn't have a lot of choice, quite honestly. When we made the first album, it was a hard thing to do at the time. I mean, technically speaking, it was hard because... It
sounds like a very elaborate production, sometimes a bit too elaborate, but very elaborate.
Yeah, but you got... Yeah, it was, but you have to remember that was all recorded when there was only 4-track tape recorders. And in those days, you had... I mean, Musicians Union sort of stuff over here was really kind of heavy, and you had to sing. So all those guys came in with those orchestrations that David Whittaker had put together. We'd never heard them, and we had to sort of get up and sing with all these top brass session musicians, and it was very, very intimidating, because, you know, we'd never done anything like it before. So that was quite hard.
And after the album had been released, did you attempt to do the tracks off the album?
No, we didn't. We did a couple of them. I mean, like, I'm going to MP3 use some stuff over it, a BBC broadcast, and that's actually got Love Is, you know, which is on that album. I don't even remember doing it, but it's on the tape, so it must have done. It's not off the record. And Polly's doing the flute on it and the vibes. And it's actually, apart from my terrible singing, sounds great.
Yeah. I think you're doing yourself an injustice. Also, you mentioned the Bob Dylan song, I'll Be Your Baby Tonight.
Yeah.
You've got the BBC version, and I've just been reading, when you told me you had that copy, that you apparently do a bit of a piss take on the song.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it piss take. It was, I mean, it's basically like, Giorgio would come up with these ideas, you know, you'd be sort of merrily going away about your business, and all of a sudden he'd call you in to the office, you know, and he'd go, look, I'm not even going to bother to try and do his accent, you know, but it's quite sort of like brusque. Say, it's this song, we must do it, you know. And we go, what song? And Bob Dylan, great song, you know, and we kind of like, well, why don't we do one of our own, you know? No, I must do this great big hit, you know. Of course, we did it, but I mean, we're kind of all listening to it and saying, well, hang on, what's this got to do with us? But when we did it in good humour. Put it that way, we weren't taking a piss. It was just done in good humour, if you know what I mean. Actually, at the end of the day, I thought it was all right.
Well, we'll play it. If our listeners complain, we'll let you know.
Oh, well, the version I'll get over to you. I'm sorry, I can't actually send it to you till my son comes home, because I've actually tried.
That's all right.
And it was coming up like 120,000 K of information.
Oh, dear.
So I switched it off immediately.
Yeah.
I thought it would completely close your computer down, you know. So there's something wrong there, but when he gets back, he'll send it over to you.
That'd be great. I want to get on to the second album there, Brian, because it couldn't be more different if it tried, but that was the direction that music was heading into. So was it a conscious decision to do like I'm going to call it a hard prog rock album? Was it a conscious decision, or was it just a natural sort of thing because everyone sort of was leaning towards that area?
It was, it's kind of like the first album we did. Everybody was kind of at the end of it. We were all relieved it was finished, I think. I think that's fair enough to say. We were relieved that it was finished and it was done, because there was some quite sort of... there was some quite trying times doing that record. One thing or another, which I won't go into. But I mean, it was quite hard. As I say, with the top session brass and everything, it was quite hard for us. Second time round, you know, because we didn't actually think we'd get the opportunity to make another album after that, we thought, because Polydor didn't like the first album. And don't forget, Polydor was Marmalade's bread and butter. And they didn't like it. They didn't think it was much good. So when we got the chance to record another one, we just said, look, we don't really want to do another one unless we can do it how we want to do it. And that is basically, we'll play the music, warts and all. So it's just us, nobody else. We don't want any more arrangers coming in telling us what to do and blah, blah, blah. So that's why the second one's so different, because it was basically, it was what we were actually going towards as a live band, because that's what we were before we became the Blossom Toes, and that's what we wanted to be. We didn't want to be just this studio thing, which we were getting in danger of being with the first album, because it was almost impossible to reproduce that record, obviously, without all the orchestration and everything. It's been quite hard to do.
Now, just put, if only for a moment, back on the turntable, it's sort of very prescient because it's like anti-war.
Absolutely, yeah, but I mean, don't forget, at the time, I mean, when that was made, I mean, America was out in Vietnam, and there was a lot of stuff going down, and we, you know, more and more information was coming through, don't forget. I mean, like these days, you know, we're completely festooned with information, you know, bogged down with it. But in those days, I mean, stuff was coming through that was shocking, and it was affecting everybody. I agree with you. I wouldn't like to say there's anything prophet-like about it, but it just kind of shows you that nothing changes.
The more things change, the more they stay the same.
You know, I mean, so a lot of people have said, you know, about the second album, well, it's a bit doomy. But I said, well, I don't think it's doomy. It's just kind of like, you know, it's just the way things are, you know, and we just wanted to sort of reflect how we felt at the time. That's why we did it. I prefer the second record myself, because I think it's more true to the band.
And here in Australia, we think both albums. The only reason why we're playing is because we think they're still relevant today.
Oh,
and,
that's great. I mean, that's brilliant.
And I mean, years has passed.
Don't tell me.
Was there any thought that, even though these Blossom Toes albums haven't been a hit, was any idea that they'd stay around, they wouldn't go away?
Absolutely not. No, I mean.
Do you feel chuffed though that, you know?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, absolutely. Every time anybody mentions anything I've done a bit with the Blossies or whatever, I'm always shocked. You know, I think, well, okay, you sure? You sure you're talking to the right bloke?
Let's finish talking about the Blossom Toes and let's get on to BB Blunder, which was basically the Blossom Toes 2.
BB Blunder was, it's just me and Brian and Kevin. I had an opportunity to work together again, and a guy called Pete Swales, who was a friend from the Blossom Toes days, and by this time had started working with the Rolling Stones' office, and he set up a company called Sahara and gave us the opportunity to go and record again. That's what that is born out of.
And speaking of Rolling Stones, a certain Mick Taylor on this album.
That's right, yeah. Well, actually, Mick, yeah, because Pete was kind of working at the Stones, he took some rough cuts down, and Mick Taylor was, I think, knocking around in the office, and he heard the New Day song, and he just said, I'd like to have a play on that, and of course Pete phoned us up and said, Mick Taylor would like to do some slide, and we went, please.
Yeah, go ahead.
How much does he want?
I'm going to ask you, where did the BB Blunder, because if there's a name there asking for trouble or to be jinxed, that's the right name, so how did you...
Yeah, I reckon, it's... I don't know. I mean, I think it just came out of Brian and Brian blundering.
The two Brians.
I think, you know. Yeah. I mean, it was nothing to put it this way. I think one of the tape operators thought of it. I can't, you know, why we let it go, I don't know, but we did.
Who was managing you at the time? Did you have a manager, or?
We didn't have a manager, no.
Okay.
Basically, Pete Swales was financing through the money he'd got off the Stones to do his Sahara thing. He was financing the recording. So no, we had no management.
What about after BB Blunder? What did you get into then, Brian?
Well, I moved totally into another direction because I was married by then to my wife Angie, and she's Julie Driscoll. I don't know if you know Julie. I'm probably heard of her.
Yes, and Brian Organ.
Yeah, she's my sister-in-law, and she was by then sort of working with her husband of now, Keith Tippett, and Keith, and we got to know. I mean, I knew Julie anyway for ages, and got to know Keith obviously through Julie as a friend, and just started getting involved with those guys, you know,
Okay.
the jazz players. But young jazz players, I mean, I'm not talking sort of the Foot Tappers Club. I mean, these young guys were sort of basically like, you know, jazz players, but rock musicians who played jazz, you know. Well, that's one step further ahead in terms of what they could do with their instruments. And so I started getting involved with them, and that's basically what I've been doing up until now, getting more and more muddled up.
You mentioned you've got some Blossom Toe stuff in your archives there. Is planning to release them?
I mean, I've got demos and things like that, you know, things that never sort of got past the demo stage.
And you're planning to release them?
Well, I'd like to. I'd like to sort of kind of put some stuff together, because I've just, in fact, with the help of my son, well, with a lot of help from my son, managed to put a site together now for all these years. And
Well, we'll play them.
Oh, well, you know, I mean, once I've got something together, I've got your address, I'll be posting it.
That's great, Brian. We've got to go. We're running out of time. But,
all right, Nick, well, it's nice to talk to you, and thank you ever so much.
Not a problem, Brian. Look, the reason I think I told Jim and Polly this is the fact that the reason why we're talking to you guys is we think the Blossom Toes is worth playing. They still stand up, and they're two great albums. And unfortunately, you know what? I've got my little book here, and I'll just read you out, because it's not just us. This is a book called The Great Psychedelic Discography, and coming on like a fusion of the Beatles with a move, they were launched with the album We Are Ever So Clean, which surely should have fared better in the commercial stakes. That's a book by Martin C. Strong. So there's the Blossom Toes live on, and it's great to talk with you, Brian.
Yeah, well, it's nice to talk to you, Nick.